Let's place the correct symbol, less than or greater than, between the numbers -1 and -3. Well, let's take our number line and let that help us out. -1 and -3. Here's -1, here's -3. -1 that's mentioned first is to the right of -3. That means -1 is greater than -3. -2 and 2/10 and 0. -2 and 2/10 is in the negative side to the left of -2. 0 is to the right. -2 and 2/10 is mentioned first. -2 and 2/10 is to the left of 0. So -2 and 2/10 is less than 0. Now, this should make some sense to you in that -1 and -3 could, for example, represent temperatures on a very cold day. If the temperature is 1 below 0, that temperature is greater than a temperature of 3 below 0. -1 is greater than -3 because 1 below 0 is slightly warmer than 3 below 0. A temperature of -2 and 2/10 is less than 0. That would be colder than the 0 temperature. Employing our absolute values and opposites, let's work this one. Well, to work this one, we're going to have to figure out the absolute value of -1 and 3/10, which is positive 1 and 3/10. The opposite of -5 is positive 5. Now we locate 1 and 3/10 and locate 5. 1 and 3/10 is to the left of 5, therefore 1 and 3/10 is less than 5, and so our initial answer must be less than. Next example asks about negative, that is opposite of the absolute value of 3/5, opposite of the absolute value of -8/10. Now we have a bit of a problem here in that it's difficult to determine which one is greater or less when they're written in such different notations. So let's solve part of that problem by changing the 3/5 to a decimal or the 8/10 to a fraction. I've chosen to change 3/5 to a decimal. 3/5 means we would divide 5 into 3. We get 0. We place our decimal, affix a 0, divide 5 into 30 and get 6. 6 times 5 is 30. So that means that 3/5 is the same as 6/10. And so we have opposite of the absolute value of 6/10, opposite of the absolute value of -8/10. Then, following our rule for working within the expressions first, we'll take the absolute value of 6/10, which is 6/10. We'll take the absolute value of -8/10, which is 8/10. The opposite symbols stay with us, and we have the opposite of 6/10, opposite of 8/10. The opposite of 6/10 is -6/10. The opposite of 8/10 is -8/10. And so we'll place -6/10 and -8/10 together to determine which one is less. -6/10 would be to the left of 0, going 6/10 of the way down, so that would be somewhere right about here. Opposite of 8/10 or -8/10 is 8/10 of the way down toward -1. -6/10 is to the right of -8/10. That means the symbol here must be greater. Therefore, at the beginning, the symbol would be greater. So, opposite of the absolute value of 3/5 is greater than the opposite of the absolute value of negative 8/10. Exercises for you to try. I believe we can get them all on the screen this time. I've given you 3 exercises. Place the correct symbol, and I'm giving you 3 choices: less than, greater than, or equal to. Place the correct symbol, less than, greater than, or equal to, between the 2 numbers. Exercise number 1, the 2 numbers are negative 15 and negative 14. For exercise 2, the 2 numbers are absolute value of negative 5 1/3, opposite of negative 16/3. For exercise 3, 1 3/10, opposite of 2 6/10. Copy these 3 exercises, stop the tape, work the problems, and then turn the tape back on to check the answers. Negative 15 is less than negative 14. For number 2, absolute value of negative 5 1/3 is equal to the opposite of negative 16/3. For number 3, 1 3/10 is greater than the opposite of 2 6/10. This concludes our first tape number 051.